The Crystal Charter, Daughter of the Red Seal. Read and written by Rebecca Sewell. Chapter 10. Maebe found she walked through the stalls with distraction in her mind. A song-goat cheesecake and a pot of crystal brew couldn't pull her thoughts away from her conversation with Mouse. She had abandoned her father to accompany him, and she hadn't made any plans on what to do now she was here. She wanted to help Mouse, but she had fallen short of having any productive ideas. Like a hound chasing its tail, the thrill of catching what she wanted was far more enjoyable than biting down and admitting to herself she should be heading south. The city hummed around her. The noises of sellers calling out, offering sweet-smelling foods, the chatter of washerwomen gossiping by clean waters that ran from the public crystal taps. A hedge witch, with a selection of yellow and orange crystals, called after her, promising he could charge them sufficiently enough to perform basic needs, heat her home, or carry messages in a flitter. He had a selection of rough-looking devices, imitations of items sold via the Guild for a lower cost. 2 artificer witches strode past him with distasteful look, their tall, rust-coloured hats pointed to the sun, and brass lapel pins showing them as guild members. When a witch is born, their powers fall into a class, or more than one class if they are exceptional. Those that excel with plants, herb care, and healing will leave their homes to apply to the Nature Guild. Those with talent in charging crystals, engineering and magic craft seek out the artificers. Potion makers and fortune tellers will travel to the Night Guild in the tallest peaks of the Northernland Mountains. Those with raw strength in their powers, but no particular talent, train as warriors for the War Guild. Any witch can take a challenge to join any guild, but many refuse to join the artificers, since they enforce the rules of green, and breaking the rules can result in a stint in the crystal mines. Most artificers are born on Greenian soil. But a witch can only take one guild challenge. They are advised to choose their guild after a period of reflection. If a witch fails their challenge, they are cast out. Not all shun the idea of joining the artificers if their talents are clear. Clest was flecked with witches bearing traits of their home countries, curling hair and darker skin from Artio, pale watery eyes, and the occasional scale from the Northernland coasts. Maebe had heard a rumour that a blessed Nemanian had left their home country once to join the artificers. Blessed, skin as crimson as rose, and hair and eyes as black as the mines of the Blasted Mountains, called this because the war god Cain coloured them so that their enemies would never see them bleed in battle. Many blessed Nemanian witches joined the War Guild. It was unheard of for one so touched by a god to ever want to leave Nemain. 2 options remained for those witches who fail: become a hedge witch, or join the scholars. The Scholar Guild demanded no particular strength in magic, but only accept the keenest of minds. To join, they must face scathing judgment of the Wizard of the Scholars. Becoming a hedge witch is to be looked down on by guild members in any country. They often sell their small powers to humans, or seek work as humans do. Those with pitiful powers give up on a life of magic, or practice it behind their own walls with no one to judge. The only witches that do not live by the law of the guilds are dream witches. Maebe had tried to research them when she was young, but many texts claim they are so elusive, their existence is as questionable as the gods. She drifted through the noisy streets, hands in her pockets, and unable to focus on the trays of magical trinkets. She stopped to finger a filigree silver rod with a yellow crystal on the end that repelled rain if you held it above your head, and was about to turn away after a child's doll that moved on its own with malachite crystals for eyes. A display of bright blooms erupted from large crystals in the centre of a fountain, and she wandered closer, recognising the handiwork of one of the few nature witches to reside in green. The glint of sunlight on a selection of delicate flitters that resembled tiny honeybirds and beads distracted her from thoughts of the nature witch called Hannah. An idea took root in her mind. She was about to give up on the markets anyway, and now she had an excitement that pulsed through her. She made her way back to the inn and asked one of the servants for use of a flitter, then set about finding one of the witches who had accompanied them from Elpis. Enchanter Lilov was a trained artificer in the king's military, who had been invited to work for Prince Marcellus. He was gloomy by nature, but content with the easy work that the prince offered him. The witch buried his face into the high buckled collar of a witch's military uniform, so when he spoke it came across mumbled. His heavy pointed hat lay on his unmade bed. Long wavy hair covered enough of his face so that only his heavy-lidded eyes were visible, even without a hat. He had been trying to relax in his private room and avoid the company of others. Maebe stood in front of him, holding the clear, spherical yellow crystal. In her other hand was a flitter borrowed from the inn, a simple contraption of white twisted into 2 compartments, one for a crystal to power it and one for a scroll. "I just want you to adjust it so that it flies low and slow. I don't want it to shoot off into the sky and descend on the recipient. I want to be able to follow it. This is the crystal to power it?" she asked, getting vexed with his disinterested sighs. "You could just deliver the message yourself if you're going to walk to its location," he grumbled, picking at his nails. "Can you do it, or not?" she demanded more firmly. She knew a flitter could find Joseph, the song-goat herder. The range from flitters died off before the mines in the mountains, but herders rarely ventured that far. She needed to know if it could be adjusted first. "Why should I do it for you? I'm here at Prince Marcellus's disposal, not those of non-noble birth." He fell quiet towards the end, but Maebe heard it and scowled at him. She was used to being sneered at by lords and ladies of the palace for not being noble, but witches were usually accommodating to the Sumine family. "You can do it now, or I can go and get Prince Marcellus to ask you himself," she challenged him to refuse. She didn't want to ask Mouse. She had wanted it to be a surprise. She could go and pay a hedge witch or a guild member, but now she felt she had to prove herself, that she was someone important enough to be obeyed by an enchanter. "Fine," he sighed, scratching his temple and shrugging. "I'll give it to you in the morning. Oh, and Miss Sumine, this arrived for you." He handed her a small red crystal as she dumped the flitter on his table. "What is it?" she asked, turning the weak crystal over in her hands. "A message from one of the witches at the palace, sent at Lady Certainly Taru's request. Activate it over some paper to receive the message. I didn't read it, so I don't know what it is," he grunted. "I know how they work. Shouldn't you have brought this straight to me?" she demanded. "It only got here just before you did. I'd have brought it to you at dinner or some time," he drawled with a bored sigh. Maebe clicked her teeth and stormed out of the room with the cheerless witch calling, "You're welcome," after her. She was irritated both by the witch and the fact that Certainly had found a way to bother her with the Mooney Gulf between them. Using a royal witch as a messenger must have cost her a fortune in money, or favours. Maebe just hoped she hadn't been socialising with the starlings while she was away. She dropped the message in her room and went to check on Mouse, hearing his door click in the hallway. He looked worse after a day with the council than he had with a hangover. "I'd rather have the old codgers give me a thrashing in the training ring than the verbal lashing those arrogant merchants gave me," he complained as she walked in. "What's wrong with arrogant merchants?" Maebe teased, unceremoniously plonking onto the bed next to him. "I'm too tired to be witty. Leave me in peace, or make my headache go away. I don't want to start dealing with complaints tomorrow. I want to drink," he declared, pulling a pillow over his face. "You're not clever enough to be witty even when you are rested," she joked. His glower was his only response. "Fine, I'll make you some tea and you can tell me about it. I have a surprise that might cheer you up."